while we're waiting, we'll go ahead and take any questions that you might have. So anything that's come up during our time together yesterday and today, anything you want a little more insight into based on my experience and opinions, don't hesitate to go ahead and type it into the chat box. And we will speak to it if there's an answer that can be shared. So the question arises, do you always use Om to chant through the chakras? I seem to recall you mentioned using seed mantras. No, you don't always use Om. The seed mantras are found on page 21 of Kriya Yoga Continuing Lineage of Enlightenment, and also on page, let's see, I know it's here, page 56 of Kriya Yoga Vichara. So there are specific seed mantras that we can use, and we will get to them this weekend. But Om works very well. Yes, thank Odesk for getting them on Kindle. It's really easy to hire someone when you don't know what you're doing. So took a little bit of work, but getting them on Kindle worked out pretty well. So any other questions that are on your mind? I don't think I can give you a description of unconditional love. It's love that's unconditional, meaning you love and appreciate what's there before you without putting conditions upon it. So maybe I can't give a description. It's like something shows up and you don't say, I wish you were something else. That, in a sense, is unconditional love. So when we discuss meditation and your questions about what's it like to know God, well, you got to ask yourself, are you having a sense of conditions around how you want God to show up, or divine consciousness or enlightenment to show up? Because if you have an idea and a specific concept in mind, well, you're probably going to miss it because you're putting conditions on it. Yeah, trying to describe something like unconditional love is not an easy thing. But if you just think about the meaning of the word unconditional and also the idea that follows, that's it. All right, so it's 6 o'clock. Today's final session is really going to focus on doing some more meditation practice. But I do have scheduled into the time the question and answer. So we've had a few questions pop up. What we'll do is we'll just double check before we go on to the meditation itself. And if you have a question, type in yes, and then you can later on fill in what that question is, just so I know to wait for your question. If you have no questions, please type in no. Excellent. So far we have 2 people with questions, 3 people with questions. which we'll speak to as soon as they share them with us. And try to make these, questions about your practice or your understanding about the process. And don't be afraid to ask questions. I might not answer the way you want, but ideally, we really want to get into what you're curious about. Because it's the only way you learn. And it's the only way that you are able to get insights, is by taking the opportunity. Okay, good. So the questions are coming, and here is the first one. I sometimes feel like I need a few quick breaths between Sushumna breathing. Is that normal, or do I have a deeper than normal natural breathing during Sushumna, and that's why I feel I need to catch up with quick breaths in between? Sounds to me like you might be moving a little too slowly, because the process of Sushumna breathing, it shouldn't cause you to have lack of oxygen or lack of air, which is why you feel like you need to take 2 quick breaths. So what I would say is just breathe in a normal fashion and get your rate to the point to where you don't feel like you have to take quick breaths to catch up. So you're probably either trying to make it too slow. At least that's my assessment. Does that make sense based on what your experience is? Or if you can give a little bit better description, we can also move on that too. Okay, good. Yeah, you don't want to get to the point to where you're short on air. Like, for example, there's one advanced technique where you pull the life force up the spine and you actually hold your breath. And you don't want to do that so long that when you're done, you gotta like get your breath back. You just want to hold it long enough to where you're comfortable and then let it go so you can just breathe normally. That's always the judge for those kinds of practices. You don't want to strain yourself. During our meditation this afternoon, the questioner mentions that there was actually a feeling of pulsations on each chakra while chanting Om. And, everyone's experience is different. You want to know that this is a common phenomenon. Yeah, because the whole point is to get into the feeling of the chakra. And then as you chant Om, 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 as though it's pulsing, you will be able to feel that. So not everyone can, and it doesn't matter if you do or not. But if you do feel the area of the chakra pulsing, or maybe a warmth, or you're just more aware of the area, that's good, because it allows you to sink your attention more into the area. So always remember, the feeling is very important to get you centered. This is a good question. Do you recommend music that is specifically designed to put people into meditative states? No. I recommend that if you're going to listen to music, just listen to music. If you're listening to music, you're just listening to music. I remember experimenting with some of those, what holosync things or brainwave pattern things or binaural beats or something of that nature. And it doesn't really do anything that regular meditation can't do. And we have to remember that the point of meditation is to internalize your awareness internally. Even using a mantra is a sense of externalization, but at least it's an internal part of your exterior self, I guess you could say. But I don't recommend music. You need to learn to meditate in silence. You need to learn to get used to the silence as well. If you enjoy music, enjoy music. Okay. Oh, this is a good question. In reference to living the Kriya lifestyle, what do you think about the occasional glass of wine? I asked because before I started practicing just about a year ago, I had a glass of wine, and I'm assuming that means every night, not overnight, because that'd be a long glass of wine. But I had a glass of wine. I no longer do this, nor do I feel I need it anymore. So grateful. Just wondering what the thoughts are on this. Okay, so basically, if you want to have a glass of wine, have a glass of wine. If you want to have a beer with your friends, have a beer with your friends. If you don't like it, don't do it. I'm not into piety in any way. And we do things all day long that are probably worse than a glass of wine, like checking Facebook all the time. So if you have an option between getting off of all of your social media or having a glass of wine, go for the glass of wine. And to speak to that, we got to make sure we don't take that out of context. I don't really drink that much anymore. When it comes to having a beer with people, I usually skip it. When I was younger, I didn't have any problems with it. And then just like I quit eating meat cold turkey, I also quit drinking any kind of alcohol, which again bothered my friends because, in college, even if you're underage, it's easy to get alcohol. And I hadn't yet turned 21, but I quit drinking any kind of alcohol, quit eating meat. I even smoked. I quit smoking just about a year before I turned 21. And again, that was not so good for my friends because I had planned to have a pig roast and kegs of beer and all these things for my 21st birthday to celebrate because I was in West Virginia and that is a thing to do there. And I still got the keg, but not for myself. What I actually would do is I would go into the garage where my dad had another refrigerator, and I would pour in a non-alcoholic beer and act like I had been drinking from the keg. So that caused some rifts with my friends. And I was pretty hardcore about that for about 5 or 6 years. And then one day I thought to myself, I wonder how much of this is in my head. So I had a beer with a friend who came to visit. He was from I don't know where he went, off to work after college. He said, "Oh, well, I'll buy you a beer." I said, "Okay." So he bought me one, and I felt horrible the next day. I felt like an utter wreck. And I thought to myself, that's kind of funny. Why would I feel that way after one beer? That's kind of dumb. So I thought, is this in my head because I'm hanging around too many people that say you can't even eat a grilled cheese sandwich off of a grill that even had meat cooked on it because they act like, their intestines are going to melt if they do that. I'm like, am I getting too influenced by these other individuals? And so I said, I'm going to just go have another one with my friends. So I did. And I told myself, I'm perfectly fine. It's not going to bother me, not even an issue. Sure enough, it wasn't even a problem. It's just normal. I was fine the next day, could meditate, could exercise. I felt fine. So the point I'm trying to get at is you don't want to go overboard. If it's just something you do and it's not a compensation for something, that's also the other issue, is a lot of people drink caffeine or have a glass of wine, especially wine. They'll say, I'm doing it for my health, when really it's a compensation for something in their life, but it's a good excuse. So you don't want to do it to compensate for anything, but it's not that big a deal. So I wouldn't worry about it. So if you choose not to, if you choose to, no worries. All right, so other questions we might have. Doesn't seem like there are any more, so that's good. Now here's a good one. And do bear in mind that my rule for what you should and should not do, my basic rule that you need to just burn into your awareness somewhere is whatever you're doing, does it affect your meditation practice? Does it affect your capacity to stay focused on your life path? If it does, then you don't do it. I don't care what it is. You don't do it. If it does not affect it, I don't care. As long as you're not hurting yourself, it doesn't matter to me. So I don't have a list of rules about all these shoulds and shouldn'ts, because I can assure you that for a long time I did have that list of rules, and you can make yourself miserable trying to be a perfect saint, when really, by doing that, you're actually missing the point. And you can experience quite a bit of clarity just by remembering my basic rule. And then you're not beating yourself up at all about anything. So another question. This is great. I have a large library of spiritual type books, Hindu, Buddhist, etc., etc. I have an urge to chuck them all, maybe keep actual texts. I guess I'm wondering about your idea on having all this necessary interpretive stuff. It's almost like I'm not trusting my own practice or experience. What do you think? Well, I've done that same thing at least twice. I remember many times I was like, what am I doing with all these books? This is all just more mental stimulation. And I gave them all away to a yoga studio. And then later on, I thought to myself, I would kind of like to read one of those books because there's information in it that I need. So I had to kind of go back to the yoga studio and say, mind if I take this book back? So I learned to just keep my books. Even if, for me, they're not really speaking to me at my current stage of realization or development, maybe they'll speak to someone else and you can give them away. Overall, though, you really don't want to, at least, okay, my experience is, you don't really want to read all kinds of stuff all the time. Meaning, when I began studying these things, I mainly only read the Yoga Sutras, the Bhagavad Gita. I was really into Ayurveda when I first got started, so I would read a lot of David Frawley's books, but I even let that go eventually. And so then I was just reading the Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita. I would occasionally get into Autobiography of a Yogi again, but not too often. The other book I would read would be Talks with Ramana Maharshi and a book called Vasista's Yoga. Those are pretty much the 4 books that I focused on, because other books I would read, and it was just someone else's idea about stuff that was not really in line with my own particular practice and what I wanted to develop. So you got to be very cautious about trying to read a whole bunch of different people. Like, for example, I got into Eckhart Tolle for a while because his first book was great, but then he got a little bit weird with the pain body and all that sort of stuff. And you're going to find out with authors, once they get discovered and people know they're paying attention to them, they have to crank out a new book with a new idea in order to stay valid. All right. And so I don't read a lot, and I've never really truly read a lot of other types of things. I found particular texts that I enjoyed to contemplate myself, and I focused on them. So yeah, I would encourage you to really try to trust your own experience, your own intuition. And I encourage you not to try to be the library of spiritual ideas, because then you just get confused. It's easy to get confused because anyone can publish a book. I'm proof of that. You just write a book and you get yourself a self-publishing company and off it goes. So you want to be very selective, I think. And again, the books that I read Autobiography of a Yogi quite a few times. I didn't read it because I thought it was so fantastic. I read it because I wanted to get behind the meaning of the stories that I was being told. Not so I'd be in all of them, but because I would get behind what is the meaning of them. I would read the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. I would read the Bhagavad Gita, and I would read them to contemplate them, not to treat them like literal, not like people take the Bible literally. People can also take the Bhagavad Gita literally, but the Bhagavad Gita is a metaphor for your own spiritual growth process. So Autobiography of a Yogi, Yoga Sutras, Bhagavad Gita, and I would read them repeatedly. I loved Talks with Ramana Maharshi. Someone sent me an email asking, who wrote that book. I don't know who wrote it. I thought it was just Talks with Ramana Maharshi. It's just like a restating of things he said to people. And the other book, Vasista's Yoga, VASISTHA' Yoga. It's about that book. It's like probably 900 pages, and that's probably my all-time favorite book. I read it constantly. It takes me about a year to get through the whole thing. Once I'm done, I take a little bit of a break. I start over. So, as I mentioned, I don't read widely in that regard. When I did, I liked a little bit of Eckhart Tolle with The Power of Now. I always thought Alan Watts' stuff was really entertaining. So I've got a bunch of his books. I used to read a lot of his books. I like a lot of Krishnamurti, Jiddu Krishnamurti stuff. I don't know a lot about him, but I do know I really appreciate his approach. I've never read any of his books, but I've watched a lot of his talks on YouTube. I just like to listen to them when I'm driving around or when I'm just sitting at home, or when I go on a hike. But there was only one or two that were kind of weird. You could tell, I don't know why he was giving the interviews he was giving. But mostly, a lot of his things are pretty good from my experience. But your goal is to really pay attention to simplicity. The more simple something is, probably the more accurate it is. You want to avoid people who talk about meeting Babaji. I remember one particular story. I'm not going to name names because that's rude. But I was meeting with Mr. Davis, and he was talking about a very popular yogi, an Indian man, a yogi, who was talking about how he met Babaji. And, Mr. Davis met this guy and asked him, you talk a lot about meeting Babaji. Like, did you really meet Babaji? And he called Mr. Davis Dave. I guess he thought that was his first name. Said, well, Dave. So his full name is Roy Davis. He'd say, well, Dave, I met him in my mind. Because they thought they were just having a conversation amongst people who were in the guru business. So you want to be real cautious of people who publicly talk about things like that. Because if you have an experience like that, you're not going to talk about it. More than likely. Especially after it becomes such a big issue, after Autobiography of a Yogi. So you don't want to get involved with people who are kind of playing on the fantasy that they make up because they want to be connected to, Autobiography of a Yogi or something of that nature. So you got to be real cautious with that. Again, everyone's going to say something valuable at some point in time. So don't want to be too judgmental. But if you get a sense like, yeah, maybe that isn't quite accurate, you might be right. So question, I was wondering what you thought of Krishnamurti. He cuts through all of it. Open the jail door rather than decorate the prison. I've never heard that before. Is that something he said? But that's true. And I found that to be true, which is why I've always enjoyed him. The first video I ever watched on Krishnamurti, the thing that was really, really kind of clinched it for me, was it was this long talk, and he was sitting there talking, and then about an hour later, he looks around, and he says, "Can I go now?" He just takes the microphone and drops it and walks away. I thought, that's exactly right. Don't make a big deal out of it. When you're done, you're done. Move on. What are your thoughts on Buddhism? You feel the Kriya Yoga and Buddhism are the only teachings that lay a path very simply and clearly. I like the idea of Buddhism. I've never really studied it a whole lot. I mean, there is a lot of complicated Buddhism out there, so you got to be real cautious on when you say Buddhism, what exactly are you talking about? But those Four Noble Truths, you can't beat them. They sort of line everything up exactly. If you know those, you know it all. And so, for example, that book, Vasishtha's Yoga, is said to be, when I did some research on it, is said to be a overlapping of like Vedanta and early Buddhist ideas. So you might enjoy that book, Vasishtha's Yoga, for that reason. It is also very direct. Good. And you understand when you read it why I like it, because essentially it says the whole point of it is that everything is consciousness. It takes 900 pages to get to that point. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and meditate now, unless there are no other questions. And again, we'll just check in. If you have a question, just say yes, so I know to wait. If you don't, just say no. And then if we have a quorum of no's, if quorum is the right word, I think you need people for a quorum, we'll go ahead and get into the meditation. Great. Okay. So let's do it. We're following the same procedures that we consistently follow. This is the same procedure, basically, that I have followed for many, 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 many years. It's the same procedure I'm going to do tomorrow, the next day, next week, next month, probably for quite a while. So you want to give your attention to your body. Feel the body. What's going on in the consciousness of your body right now? Focus on the breath as the breath enters and exits the body. How do you feel as your body breathes? Be aware of your environment. Again, gaze gently straight ahead. Just being aware of what you can see in the periphery of your vision. Kind of acknowledging where you are. And breathe. Turn your attention to the sounds that you hear. Just listen to the real obvious sounds, my voice, and so on. Maybe the TV that you have going on in the background, or to the gentle silence, maybe the movement of your house or something far off in the distance. Just be aware of what you hear. Now turn your attention to your mind. What are you thinking about? What's going through your head right now? And then be aware of yourself that is able to perceive the thoughts, to be conscious of the thoughts, to be conscious of the sounds, to be aware of the body. What is that? That seer, S-E-E-R, the seer, that can perceive all this changing phenomena within and around you. That's what you are, and that's the eternal you. So consider that, be that, acknowledge it. Now close your eyes. Close your eyes and pull your attention inward, more deeply into your body. Feeling the breath. And when you get to what you consider to be your core, whether it's your heart or, again, the length of your spine, as far inward as you can go, take a moment to consider all the people that you have been inspired by and looked up to spiritually, philosophically. You're not trying to connect with them, you're just honoring and acknowledging that radiance within them. And within your heart, within your core, honor and acknowledge that that same light that is within you is the exact same light that is within them. They had their personality, their role in the world. They had fantastic experiences or talked very lucidly about spiritual processes, but whatever they did, whoever they were, whatever good and bad things that were about them, that in them was a core of radiance, purity, clarity. And that same core is yourself. So honor and acknowledge that you, that core of light within you, is exactly the same, whether you're aware of it yet or not, as all those people, all those inspirations that you have. You have to accept this about yourself. Acknowledge that, accept it. Feel it very deeply within your heart. And from this knowing, also acknowledge that you are supported in this process. You might not be aware of it. It might not be so obvious, but you are supported and guided in small little ways to greater realizations, day by day, year by year, decade by decade, to finally be at peace with yourself and know what you are. It'll happen naturally. And through our time together and your own intensive daily practice, that's just fertilizer. You're just helping the process along. And what we're going to do is we're going to begin by practicing alternate nostril breathing 12 times, 12 rounds. And as you practice alternate nostril breathing, tie in the mantra, so hum. So do your practice, and then on every inhale, hear so within your awareness. Every exhale, hear hum. And let's do this together. 12 rounds of alternate nostril breathing with so on the inhale, hum on the exhale. Now, wherever you are in the process, if you're done, that's fine. If you haven't completed all the rounds of alternate nostril breathing, we'll finish up with the most recent round and continue with the mantra so hum, resting the hands on your thighs or however you happen to be sitting. Direct your awareness to the spiritualize center, the frontal region of the brain, and continue on the inhale to chant so, on the exhale to chant hum, and to, every time you go through the process, allow the distractions to be cast off and dissolved, and allow yourself to settle more deeply internal. So on the inhale, hum on the exhale, continuing in this way until you have a deeper state of clarity, and then just continue to relax into the process. Remember to gently settle your awareness, the third eye, the frontal regions of the brain, to gently rest your attention on the mantra, so on the inhale, hum on the exhale, knowing that any distraction that arises, it's just being cast cast out, and you're settling more fully into that observational awareness that is watching the mantra, aware of the mantra, that is aware of the thoughts that come in and go out, not to get caught up in them, but to simply observe them like clouds passing through the sky. Continue this process for just a little longer. Now let go of the mantra. Keep your awareness, the frontal regions of the brain, the sixth chakra area, and just rest there, again, observing, internalized, watching, practicing contentment with whatever your current state of consciousness is, not expecting it to be different. And it's this point that where you are starting to learn to exist in that state of clarity. You do the techniques to settle yourself in, and now you have to practice remaining as the observer, staying relaxed, yet alert and awake. That's your task. And this does eventually become very easy and very natural, and it might already be that way for many of you after having practiced these techniques, because that's what they're used for. Let's just rest a little bit longer with our attention, the sixth chakra, just being with our consciousness in whatever way it's showing up, loving it unconditionally, honoring and acknowledging this divine infinite consciousness as yourself, as it is right now. And now for the final portion of our time together tonight, Lift your awareness up into the crown chakra, the very top of your head. Just feel the area, be aware of the area. And with your attention settled in the crown, we want to move into a little bit of contemplation. You want to just simply be aware of how you think about the world, what you see in the world, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. So whatever comes into your mind whenever you think about the state of the world, again, with all these very diverse forms, and with your attention on the crown, ask yourself, what would it be like if I could see unity and wholeness in all of this perceived separation? What would it be like if I could see unity and wholeness in all of these different possibilities and experiences that are happening all the time in this world to myself and to others? What would it be like to see that as a unified field? Is it possible? Ask yourself this with your attention at the crown. Is it possible? And remember, you're asking with intensity and curiosity, not to say things like, oh, what would it be like if I could see all this pain as God? You know, you're not going morbid. You're just simply really, in your mind, reviewing the world around you and asking yourself, what would it be like if I could actually see this as one whole thing, one whole unified field of awareness? And then gently take a breath in, exhale and relax, and open your eyes. But gaze softly, just to be aware of your environment around you. How you feel in your body, the sounds you hear, the things you see, the little pen on your desk or the window in front of you. And with your attention on your crown, again ask, what would it be like if I could recognize all of this as my divine self? And again, be aware of the environment and really contemplate, question, ask, is it possible for me to be aware of every little detail in my environment as a facet of my divine wholeness? And again, with your attention on your crown, ask, how can it be possible for me to recognize all of this as the infinite? And mean it when you ask. And ask it a few more times with your attention on your crown. And close your eyes again. Bring your attention to your crown and just sit and observe, dropping the questions, just feeling the crown of your head as you breathe naturally, easily. And then once more, take a gentle breath in. And as you exhale and relax, open your eyes to conclude your meditation practice. keep in mind that those things that you wonder about, those things that you bring deeply into your meditation, those are going to be the things that you learn, the things that come to you as direct realizations. So you want to take it very seriously. Your contemplative process. And you also want to think about these things throughout the day. I mean, don't just keep it in meditation. As you go about your life, when you have a moment, just wonder, what would it be like to see all these things around you, within you, as an expression of the infinite? You have to ask and be very curious about it, not just in meditation, but also throughout the day. And what you'll find is that you'll have these glimpses, these insights that either come in meditation or maybe a little bit later when you're not even paying attention. And this is how you turn your practice from just meditating to an actual conversation with the rest of you all the time. But again, we'll speak more to detailed contemplative practices when we get to that session, which I believe is tomorrow evening. So again, thank you for tuning in. The sun has gone down. The light is fading. So it's time to either go to sleep or go about your day, wherever you happen to be in the world. So we'll be in touch, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.